The cold wind blew through the broken streets of the alien city. Once this place had been full of shining lights and music. Now it was quiet, too quiet. Dust floated in the air like ash from a long-dead fire. Broken stalls, cracked windows, and faded posters were all that remained. In the corner of an old market, behind a fallen wall, two small figures huddled together. Their thin hands clung to each other as the night air bit their skin. The older one, Noma, wrapped her torn shawl around her little sister, Lyra. Lyra's eyes were large and bright, but full of sadness. "Noma, I'm hungry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please, I want food." Noma bit her lip. She had searched all day and found nothing. Not a crumb, not even a drop of clean water. The world had changed since the humans came to this planet. Trade had stopped. Farms had burned. Many alien families were gone, some taken, some lost. "I know, Lyra," Noma said softly, brushing her sister's dusty hair. "I'll find something. I promise," but her voice trembled and Lyra could hear it. She was too young to understand the full truth, but she knew hunger too well. Her small stomach growled loudly, echoing in the cold air. Noma looked around the market, her eyes scanning every corner. Rusted metal, old crates, and empty cans stared back at her. Once her parents had sold fruits here, sweet red fruits that smelled like summer. She could almost remember the taste. But her parents were gone now, lost when the war came. The city lights flickered in the distance. People whispered that the human supply convoy would arrive tonight. Humans brought food and medicine, but only if aliens could pay. And the aliens had nothing left to trade. Some offered broken jewelry, some offered tools, and some offered themselves. Noma's heart tightened. She had seen what happened to the ones who made that choice. Some never came back. Others returned. Different, a low sound broke her thoughts. Lyra had begun to cry softly. "Noma, it hurts," she said, holding her stomach. "I want Mama." Noma's chest ached. She pulled her sister into her arms, trying to warm her small body. "Shh, Lyra, don't cry. I'll fix this. I'll get you food." "I swear." She looked at the horizon where faint blue lights blinked. The convoy. The humans were coming. Around her, other aliens began to move. Thin figures with hollow eyes walking toward the landing site. The air filled with the deep hum of engines. A bright ship broke through the clouds, landing on the dusty field beyond the market. The ground shook. A few alien children ran forward, but their parents pulled them back. Everyone knew getting too close could mean trouble. Noma stood slowly, her body weak from hunger. She looked down at Lyra. "Stay here," she said. "Don't move. I'll bring food." Lyra's eyes widened in fear. "No, Noma. Don't go. They'll hurt you." Noma knelt and kissed her sister's forehead. "I'll be fine. I'm fast, remember? I'll come back before you can count to 100. She smiled, though it hurt to pretend. Lyra nodded, wiping her tears. "Promise?" "I promise," Noma whispered. Then she stood and began walking toward the lights. The human camp glowed like a different world. Clean tents, shining lamps, strong men and women in silver armor. Their voices were deep, their faces unreadable. They were giving out food, but only to those who could pay or work. From a distance, Noma watched a small alien boy trade a necklace for a small ration pack. Others weren't so lucky. A woman fell to her knees begging for bread, but the guards pushed her back. "Next," shouted a soldier. Noma's heart pounded. Her feet felt heavy. She looked down at her hands, empty, trembling. She had nothing to offer. No jewelry, no tools, no money. Only herself. For a long moment, she stood frozen, watching the line move forward. Then she heard Lyra's cry echoing in her memory. "Noma, I'm hungry." Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. She could not cry now. Not when her sister was starving. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the shadows, walking toward the line of humans. Her steps were small but firm. The soldiers noticed her. An alien girl with pale skin, tired eyes, and courage far bigger than her body. One of them frowned. "What do you want?" I need food," she said softly. "For my sister." The guard crossed his arms. "What do you have to trade?" Noma looked down, silent. She had nothing. But then she raised her head and her voice grew steady. "Take me. Let me work, please, just feed her." The humans glanced at each other. Some smirked. But one man, a tall soldier with gray eyes, looked at her differently. He didn't laugh, he looked. "Human, what's your name?" he asked quietly. "Noma," she said. "And my sister's name is Lyra." The man nodded slowly. "Wait here." Noma stood still, her heart racing. She didn't know if this was the start of hope or the start of ruin, but she had made her choice. For her sister, she would face anything. Behind her, the night wind whispered through the ruins. Somewhere far away, Lyra waited in the cold, counting softly, 1, 2, 3, believing her sister's promise. And as the human convoy lights burned bright in the dark sky, Noma's fate began to change. The air around the human camp was thick with tension and dust. The engines of their transport ship still hummed in the distance, echoing through the alien ruins. Noma stood at the edge of the camp, shivering under the strange light. Her hands were empty, her stomach hollow, but her mind was clear. She had made her decision. She looked at the long line of aliens waiting for food, weak mothers, hungry children, and old men clutching broken relics to trade. The humans behind the metal tables wore white gloves and cold expressions. They measured every alien like weighing a problem, not a person. When it was Noma's turn, a tall officer glanced up from his tablet. "Name?" he asked sharply. "Noma," she said softly. "Work type?" She hesitated. "Anything." He frowned, unimpressed. "Do you have skill? Engineering, cleaning, translation?" "No, sir. But I can learn. Please, I just need food for my sister." He sighed, looking over her torn clothes and thin frame. "We don't hire beggars." Noma felt her chest tighten, but before she could speak, another voice cut through the air. Calm, deep, and firm. "Let me handle this," said Captain Rayner, stepping forward. His armor was simpler than the others, more practical, less polished. His face carried lines of exhaustion, but also something rare in this camp: humanity. He looked at Noma and asked, "You said you have a sister?" "Yes," she whispered. "She's younger. She hasn't eaten in 2 days." Rayner's jaw clenched. He turned to the officer. "Give her a ration pack." The officer blinked. "But Captain, orders are clear." "I said give it to her." Rayner interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. The officer scowled, but handed Noma a small metal pack. Her hand shook as she held it. She could almost smell the food inside. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching it to her chest. But then as she turned to leave, Rayner spoke again. "Wait, if you want steady food, you'll need work. We're short on workers for the sanitation unit. It's hard work, but it's fair." She looked up at him with surprise. "You'd let me work here?" "Yes," he said simply. "You'll earn meals for both of you. You'll be safe here." For a moment, Noma couldn't speak. The humans behind Rayner whispered among themselves. Some looked annoyed, others curious. One muttered, "He's too soft on them." But Rayner ignored them. He handed her a small ID tag. "Keep this with you. You start tomorrow morning. Bring your sister then. She can stay near the kitchen tent." Noma bowed her head, her heart pounding. "Thank you, Captain." He nodded once and walked away, leaving her standing in the glow of the lamps, clutching the ration pack like treasure. She hurried back through the ruins, her feet light despite the dust and cold. The stars above the broken towers seemed to shine brighter tonight. When she reached the old market, Lyra was waiting, her eyes wide with fear and hope. "Noma," she cried, running forward. "You came back." Noma smiled through tears and held out the ration pack. "Look, Lyra, real food," Lyra gasped. Together they sat on the cracked stone floor, opening the pack. Warm steam rose from the small metal tray. There was soft bread, a little soup, and something that smelled like roasted roots. Lyra ate quickly, laughing and crying at the same time. "You see?" Noma said softly, watching her sister's joy. "I told you I'd find food." "But how?" Lyra asked between bites. "Did you steal it?" Noma shook her head. "No, a human gave it to me. He said I can work for him." Lyra's smile faded a little. "Humans hurt people, Noma." "Not all," Noma said quietly. "This one. He didn't look cruel. Maybe he's different." Lyra finished eating and leaned against her sister, sleepy but safe. Noma held her close, staring at the faint glow from the human camp in the distance. She should have felt relief, but inside something twisted. Was this really safety, or just another kind of trap? That night, Noma couldn't sleep. Every whisper of the wind sounded like footsteps. Every flicker of light in the distance made her heart race. She thought of Captain Rayner, his tired eyes, his quiet voice. He didn't seem like the others. But then again, kindness was often the first mask of danger. Still, she couldn't deny the truth. Lyra had eaten. And tomorrow they would both live another day. Before dawn, Noma rose quietly and looked out toward the camp once more. The human lights blinked in the distance like stars fallen to the ground. Her decision had been made in silence, but its weight was loud in her heart. She whispered to the wind, "Whatever happens, I'll protect her, even if I must give myself away to do it." The first light of morning, together they began walking toward the human camp, toward an unknown future. Behind them, the empty market stayed silent, as if holding its breath. The day that began with hunger was ending with a fragile hope, and the faint promise of change. The morning sun rose weakly over the wasteland, spreading light through clouds of dust. Noma held Lyra's hand as they walked toward the human camp. The wind carried the low hum of machines and the sharp scent of metal and oil. Every step felt heavier the closer they got. Lyra looked up at her sister with worried eyes. "Will they be nice, Noma?" Noma smiled faintly, though her heart trembled. "We'll find out soon. Stay close to me, all right?" When they reached the gate, 2 armed guards stood blocking the path. Their armor gleamed silver under the pale sun. One raised his hand. "Identification?" Noma held up the small ID tag Captain Rayner had given her. The guard scanned it, his eyes narrowing. "You're the alien Captain Rayner signed yesterday?" "Yes," Noma said softly. "He told me to report for work." The guard gave a low grunt but stepped aside. "Fine, wait near the main tent. The captain will see you." They entered the camp. It was nothing like the ruins. Tents were clean, machines hummed in rhythm, and the air buzzed with the sound of humans speaking through radios. Noma felt small among them, like a shadow moving through light. Lyra's eyes widened at the sight of shiny vehicles and strange tools. "Everything looks new," she whispered. "Yes," Noma said. "And dangerous." Moments later, Captain Rayner appeared, walking toward them. His uniform was dusty, his face calm but focused. He smiled slightly when he saw the sisters. "You came," he said. "Yes, Captain," Noma replied, bowing her head. "I'm ready to work," Rayner nodded. "Good. Follow me." He led them through the camp, past curious stares. Some humans looked at them with disgust, others with pity. One woman in uniform muttered, "They don't belong here." Another whispered, "He's wasting food on aliens." Noma heard every word, but she said nothing. Lyra clung tighter to her hand. Rayner stopped near a row of metal barrels filled with water. "This is the sanitation section," he explained. "You'll clean and refill the tanks. Hard work, but safe, and you'll be paid in meals." "Yes, Captain," Noma said quickly. He turned to Lyra. "She can stay near the kitchen tent during the day. No one will harm her." Lyra's small voice broke through. "Thank you, human," Rayner smiled faintly. "Call me Rayner. We're all just trying to survive out here." For the first time, Noma felt a spark of warmth in her chest. She nodded and began her work. The hours passed slowly. Her arms ached from carrying buckets and the sun burned her skin, but she kept going, reminding herself of Lyra's smile. Each time she passed Rayner's tent, he nodded in quiet approval. He never shouted, never insulted, never treated her like property. That alone made him different. By midday, Lyra sat with a few children from the human side, sharing a small bowl of soup. They looked curious but not cruel. Lyra giggled softly when one of them offered her a biscuit. For a moment it almost felt like peace, but peace never lasted long. That evening, as the camp lights flickered on, a harsh voice echoed through the yard. "What's this? Aliens eating human food?" It was Lieutenant Merrick, a tall man with cruel eyes and a scar across his cheek. He wore arrogance like armor. Soldiers straightened when he passed. Rayner approached him calmly. "Lieutenant, they're under my protection." "The girl works for her rations," Merrick sneered. "You're too kind, Captain. These creatures don't work, they infect. You give one food and 100 come begging." Rayner's tone sharpened. "That's enough," Merrick smirked. "Careful, Captain. Mercy gets you court-martialed these days." He stepped closer to Noma, his gaze cold. "You like serving humans, girl? Think you're special because the captain pities you?" Noma stayed silent, her head lowered. She could feel Lyra trembling beside her. Rayner moved between them. "Lieutenant, step away." Merrick chuckled darkly. "Don't forget who signs your reports." Then he turned and walked off, his boots crunching on gravel. Rayner exhaled slowly. "Ignore him," he said quietly to Noma. "He's not the whole of humanity." Noma looked up, meeting his eyes. "Why help us?" she asked softly. "You don't even know us." Rayner looked toward the horizon. "Because once I saw my own people starving during the war. Someone helped me then. It's time I return that debt. His words sank deep into her heart. For the first time, Noma felt something she hadn't in years. Trust. When night fell, the camp grew quiet. Noma lay beside Lyra near the edge of the tent, the stars above them shining faintly through the thin canvas. Lyra had fallen asleep clutching a piece of bread. Noma stared up at the stars. She thought of Raynor's kindness, of Merrick's hatred, of the strange line between mercy and danger. Humans were complex, some cruel, some kind. She couldn't yet tell which side the future belonged to. As the night wind blew softly across the camp, Noma whispered, Maybe not all humans are monsters. Far away, inside his tent, Captain Raynor looked at the photo of his lost daughter and murmured, Maybe not all aliens are enemies. And on that quiet night, without knowing, both human and alien began to change the fate of two worlds. The next few days passed quietly inside the human camp. Noma worked from dawn until dusk, cleaning water barrels, scrubbing tents, and carrying heavy containers under the burning sun. Her hands were cracked, her skin bruised, but each evening she found peace in watching her sister eat safely. Captain Raynor kept his word. He never shouted or demanded more than she could give. Sometimes he would walk by and ask, You doing all right? In that calm, human voice of his. Noma would nod silently. She wasn't used to kindness. It felt strange, almost heavy. Lyra stayed near the kitchen tents during the day. The cooks liked her quiet nature and often gave her extra soup. She would wait for Noma every evening, running to her with a smile that made the pain of work fade away. But under that peace, tension brewed. Lieutenant Merrick had not forgotten his anger. Every time he saw the alien sisters, his eyes turned sharp. He whispered to others about the captain's pets and soft leadership. And each night, the rumors spread like fire. One afternoon, while Noma carried a bucket of water, she overheard soldiers arguing near the supply tent. Merrick's planning something, one said. He thinks Raynor's protecting the enemy. Yeah, the other replied. He's reporting him to command. Noma froze, her breath catching. If command found out that Raynor had taken her and Lyra in, they would both be taken away, or worse. She ran back to her tent, heart pounding. That evening, as the first drops of rain began to fall, Noma found Raynor checking the vehicles. Captain, she whispered urgently. They're saying Merrick wants to report you, because of us. Raynor looked up, the rain dripping from his hair. He sighed quietly. I know. Merrick's been trying to get me dismissed for months. But if he tells command, they'll investigate, Raynor said calmly. Maybe even take you away. But listen to me, Noma. He stepped closer, his voice firm but kind. You and your sister don't deserve punishment for surviving. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. Noma stared at him, speechless. No one had ever spoken to her like that. For a moment, the storm around them seemed far away. But then thunder cracked overhead, loud and violent. The sky opened, pouring rain over the camp. Soldiers shouted, covering supplies. Tents flapped in the wind. Raynor shouted over the storm. Go find Lyra! Keep her inside! Noma ran through the mud, her heart racing. She reached the kitchen tent, but Lyra wasn't there. Panic hit her chest like fire. Lyra! She screamed. Lyra, the wind howled in answer. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the camp in brief flashes. She ran past the gates, calling her sister's name again and again, then faintly, she heard a small cry beyond the fence, outside the camp. Without thinking, Noma crawled through a gap in the barrier, stumbling into the storm. The rain stung her eyes and the wind pushed against her like a wall. Lyra, she cried again. A weak voice answered. Noma, here. She found her, half buried in mud near the edge of the ruins, her small body shaking. Noma dropped beside her, pulling her into her arms. Why did you leave the tent? I saw lights, Lyra sobbed. I thought it was you. Noma hugged her tightly, relief and fear mixing in her heart. But before they could move, headlights cut through the rain. A vehicle was coming. A human figure stepped out. It was Raynor. He had followed them. Noma, he shouted. Get inside the truck. She helped Lyra climb in. They drove back through the storm, the wipers fighting the heavy rain. When they reached the camp, several soldiers stood at the gate, weapons drawn. Merrick was among them. His face twisted with fury when he saw Raynor carrying the alien child. Captain Raynor, he yelled. You broke protocol again, harboring alien strays, risking our supplies for them. Raynor set Lyra down gently and faced him. She's a child, Merrick. You would have left her to die in the mud? They're not our problem, Merrick barked. You think the command cares about your soft heart? Rayner stepped forward, his voice cold and clear. Then maybe command needs to remember what being human means. For a moment, silence cut through the rain. Even the soldiers hesitated, looking between them. Merrick's eyes burned. You'll regret this, he hissed. Then he turned and stormed off into the night. Rayner looked down at Noma and Lyra. You're safe now, he said quietly. Noma's eyes filled with tears. You risked everything. For us. Rayner shook his head. No, Noma, for what's right. He turned toward the dark sky, the storm still raging. This camp is full of orders, he said softly. But somewhere along the way we forgot compassion. Maybe you'll remind us. That night the rain washed away the dust of the wasteland, but not the fear. Inside the captain's tent, 2 alien sisters slept safely for the first time in years, while outside thunder rolled, a warning that peace would not last long. Merrick's threat was still alive. And the real storm was yet to come. The storm had ended, but the camp did not rest. Puddles of muddy water reflected the pale light of dawn, and the air carried the sharp scent of wet metal. Noma woke to faint voices outside the tent, angry, hushed, and full of tension. She knew that tone. Trouble was coming. She looked down at Lyra, still asleep, curled in a blanket. Her small face was peaceful, unaware of the danger building outside. Noma brushed her sister's hair and stood quietly, stepping outside. Dozens of soldiers gathered near the command tent. Lieutenant Merrick stood at the center, his arms crossed, a cruel smile on his face. Beside him was a new figure, a communication officer holding a metal tablet flashing red with command's symbol. Captain Rayner's orders will be reviewed, Merrick said loudly. Command has been informed that he's harboring alien civilians inside a restricted human military zone, the soldiers murmured. Some looked uncomfortable, others nodded. Noma froze. Her heart sank. They were talking about her and Lyra. At that moment, Rayner walked out of his quarters, calm but stern. His uniform was still damp from the night before. Lieutenant, he said coldly, you went behind my back. I followed protocol, Merrick replied, feigning innocence. You broke it. Command wants results, not sympathy. These aliens have no place here. They're children, Rayner said firmly. They're under my protection. Merrick's grin widened. Then you'll fall with them. Before Rayner could respond, 2 guards stepped forward, holding rifles. Captain, command has ordered your suspension pending investigation, one of them said. The camp fell silent. Rainwater dripped from the tent edges like ticking seconds. Rayner looked at the soldiers, his own men. You're really going to arrest me for feeding a starving child? The younger of the 2 hesitated, lowering his eyes. The other stayed still, uncertain. Merrick smirked. See, Captain? They follow orders, not feelings. Noma couldn't stay silent any longer. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. Please, he did nothing wrong. He saved us. Merrick snapped. Silence, alien! But Noma didn't stop. She stepped closer, standing between Rayner and the rifles. If you punish him, then punish me too. I begged him for help. He only did what I asked. The soldiers looked confused. They weren't used to seeing an alien speak with such courage. Merrick sneered. You think your words matter? Rayner's voice cut through the tension. She's right. He looked around at his men. You all saw what happened. She and her sister were dying in the ruins. Are we really the kind of species that punishes compassion? A few soldiers shifted uncomfortably. One of them murmured, Sir, maybe we should wait for command's response. Merrick barked, Stand down! This is insubordination. Rayner's eyes hardened. No, Lieutenant. This is humanity. Merrick reached for his gun. You're finished, Captain. Before he could draw, a young soldier, Private Keller, stepped forward. Lieutenant, stop. We all saw you leave that child in the storm last night. The captain saved her. You'd have let her die. The camp went still. Merrick's face turned red with rage. Watch your tongue, Private. Rayner raised his hand calmly. Enough, both of you. He turned to the crowd. If anyone believes kindness is weakness, you're free to follow Merrick. But if you believe that humanity still means something, stand with me. For a moment, no one moved. Then Private Keller stepped beside him. Then another. And another. Soon, half the camp stood behind Rayner. Merrick's voice trembled with fury. You'll all be court-martialed for this betrayal. Rayner faced him. No, Lieutenant. We're restoring what's been lost. Merrick glared at Noma, his expression cold as ice. You caused this, he spat. You and your kind bring ruin wherever you go. He stormed off toward the comms tent, shouting for reinforcements. Raynor turned to Noma, his voice low. Pack your things. You and Lyra have to leave before he returns with more troops. Noma shook her head. No, you helped us. We won't run away now. He smiled faintly, though his eyes carried worry. Noma. Sometimes surviving is the strongest act of defiance. She wanted to argue, but Lyra had woken up and was standing at the tent flap, rubbing her eyes. What's happening? Raynor looked at her gently. We're just making things right, little one. The sound of engines broke the moment. Trucks from the nearby base were approaching. The reinforcements Merrick had called. Soldiers scrambled to prepare. Raynor's small group stood their ground, forming a human wall around the sisters. The hum of the trucks grew louder, the sky thick with dust. Noma took Lyra's hand and whispered, Stay behind me. Raynor checked his weapon, then looked at Noma. Whatever happens, don't be afraid. The first truck stopped and armed soldiers stepped out. Merrick stood at their front shouting, Arrest them all. Raynor raised his voice above the chaos. No more chains. No more cruelty. The tension exploded. Soldiers began shouting, arguing, some lowering their weapons, others raising them. The camp divided in two, those who followed orders and those who followed conscience. In the middle of it all, a thin alien girl and her sister stood between both sides holding hands, silent but unbroken. The rebellion of kindness had begun, not with bullets, but with courage. And in that fragile moment under the rising sun, humanity started to remember itself. The morning sky turned red as the dust storm rose again, wrapping the human camp in a swirling haze. The air buzzed with tension. Half the soldiers stood behind Captain Raynor, while the rest obeyed Lieutenant Merrick. The fragile peace that had held the camp together was breaking apart. One shouted order at a time. Noma stood near a supply truck with Lyra beside her, clutching her sister's hand tightly. Around them, soldiers argued, shouted, loaded weapons. The ground trembled beneath heavy boots. She had never seen humans fight one another before, and the sight filled her heart with fear and sorrow. Raynor stood in front of his men, his eyes cold but calm. We don't fight them unless we must, he said. We hold the line. No one hurts the innocent. From across the yard, Merrick's furious voice roared back. You're the traitor here, Raynor. You protect aliens over your own. Raynor's voice stayed even. I protect what's right. The two sides faced each other, tension like a wire ready to snap. Then the first shot rang out, a flash of light. A scream, and chaos broke loose. Soldiers ducked behind crates, gunfire cracking through the air. The smell of smoke filled the camp. Noma threw herself over Lyra as bullets sliced through tents. She could hear Raynor shouting orders, trying to hold back his side without killing anyone. Keep your fire low. Disable, don't destroy. But Merrick had no such mercy. Take them all down, he screamed. A blast hit the fuel barrels near the sanitation area, sending fire bursting into the air. The heat washed over Noma's skin. Lyra coughed from the smoke, eyes wide in terror. We have to move, Noma said, pulling her sister toward the vehicle area. They crawled behind a metal carrier as explosions lit up the camp. Raynor saw them from across the yard. Noma, get to the convoy truck, he shouted, waving toward a transport near the east fence. Go now. Noma shook her head. Not without you. Raynor ducked behind cover, firing a shot that disarmed one of Merrick's men. I'll be right behind you. But Merrick appeared like a shadow through the smoke, holding a rifle aimed straight at Raynor. You should have stayed loyal, Captain. Before he could pull the trigger, Noma acted on instinct. She ran from cover, slamming into Merrick's side. The gun went off, its blast grazing her arm. She cried out, falling to the ground. Raynor tackled Merrick, and the two men struggled in the dirt. Fists, metal, rage, all colliding in the chaos of battle. Merrick punched Raynor across the face, shouting, You're weak. You care too much. Raynor gritted his teeth, forcing Merrick's arm down. That's what makes us human. A final blow sent Merrick sprawling into the mud. He reached for his weapon, but Raynor grabbed it first. He pointed it at him, breathing hard. For a long moment, the two men locked eyes, one burning with hate, the other with sorrow. Do it, Merrick spat. You don't have the guts, Raynor hesitated. Then lowered the gun. No, I won't become what you are. Merrick snarled and lunged, but before he could reach the captain, Private Keller fired from behind. The blast hit Merrick squarely in the chest. He collapsed, lifeless in the mud. Silence fell over the camp. The gunfire slowed, then stopped. One by one, soldiers lowered their weapons. Rayner stood over Merrick's body, his face heavy with grief. "You brought this on yourself," he whispered. Noma tried to stand but stumbled, clutching her bleeding arm. Rayner ran to her side. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," she said, her voice weak. "Is it over?" Rayner looked around. Smoke curled through the wreckage. The human flags that once flew high now hung torn and burned. "It's over for now," he said softly. Lyra ran to them, tears streaking her dirty face. "Noma, you're bleeding!" Rayner tore a strip from his uniform and tied it around Noma's wound. "You saved my life," he said quietly. She looked up at him, managing a faint smile. "You saved mine first." The storm began to clear. The first sunlight broke through the clouds, touching the ruins with a golden glow. Rayner stood and faced the soldiers who remained. "This camp is no longer a war zone. We'll rebuild it for everyone, human or alien. We fight no more." The soldiers exchanged uneasy looks, but none argued. Some even nodded, exhaustion softening their faces. He turned back to Noma and Lyra. "We'll leave this place. Find the nearest safe zone. I'll make sure Command hears the truth." Noma looked at the burned horizon. "Will they listen?" Rayner smiled faintly. "They'll have to." Lyra slipped her small hand into his. "You're our hero," she whispered. Rayner shook his head gently. "No, little one. Heroes don't start wars. They end them." As the trio walked toward the battered convoy truck, the wind carried the smell of ash and rain. Behind them, soldiers silently buried their fallen. Ahead of them stretched the unknown, but for the first time, it didn't seem frightening, because in that battlefield of fire and fear, humanity had taken its stand, and for Noma, Lyra, and Captain Rayner, that stand had changed everything. The road stretched far beyond the horizon, golden under the first calm sunrise in weeks. The air still carried the smell of smoke and burnt metal, but for the first time since the war began, it also carried peace. Noma sat quietly in the back of the transport truck, her arm bandaged, her eyes watching the broken world pass by. Lyra rested against her shoulder, half asleep, clutching the small ration bar Captain Rayner had given her. Rayner sat at the front, steering the battered vehicle across the wasteland. His uniform was torn, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes held something steady. Hope. They had left the camp behind. Half the soldiers who survived had chosen to follow Rayner. The others scattered, unwilling to face command after Merrick's death. The battlefield was gone, but the war between mercy and cruelty still echoed in every ruined building they passed. After hours of silence, Lyra spoke softly. "Captain Rayner?" He glanced at her in the mirror. "Yes, little one." "Where are we going now?" Rayner smiled faintly. "To a place called Haven Ridge. It's a neutral zone. Humans and aliens both live there, no soldiers, no orders. Just people." Noma lifted her head. "Does such a place really exist?" He nodded. "It's small, fragile, but real. I helped build it once before the war spread." Lyra's sleepy eyes brightened. "Then we'll be safe?" Rayner hesitated before answering. "Safer than we've ever been." The truck rattled over a cracked road. Outside, the ruins thinned, giving way to dry plains and scattered trees struggling to grow again. The planet was wounded but not dead. Noma watched a flock of silver-winged birds fly past and whispered, "Maybe the world can heal too." Rayner heard her. "It can," he said quietly, "if enough people care to make it." As the sun rose higher, they reached a ridge overlooking a valley. Below lay a settlement, simple metal shelters, wind turbines, and fields sprouting faint green. A flag fluttered at the entrance, half human crest and half alien sigil woven together. Lyra gasped. "It's beautiful." Rayner parked the truck and stepped out. The wind brushed through his hair as he looked down at the valley. "Welcome to Haven Ridge," Noma followed, staring in disbelief. She saw humans and aliens working side by side, repairing homes, planting crops, and trading quietly. No one shouted. No one carried guns. Just people rebuilding. A few settlers noticed the newcomers and waved. Rayner waved back. "They'll take you in," he told the sisters. "You'll have food, shelter, and peace here." Noma frowned slightly. "You're speaking as if you're not staying." Rayner smiled faintly. I can't, I have to go back. Back? She asked, startled. But the camp is gone. The war's not over, he interrupted gently. Command needs to know what happened. Merrick's lies, the rebellion, everything. If they never hear the truth, this will all happen again. Noma's heart sank. They'll punish you. Maybe, he said. But someone has to stand before them and say that kindness is not betrayal. Lyra tugged on his sleeve. Then you'll come back later? Raynor knelt beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. If the stars are kind, yes, he smiled softly. But even if I don't, you'll both keep the promise. What promise? Lyra asked. He looked at them both. To remember what we fought for. To build something better than fear. Noma's throat tightened. You gave us hope, Captain. You gave us more than food or safety. You gave us meaning again. He shook his head. You gave it to me first. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The wind carried only the hum of the turbines and the distant laughter of children from the valley below. Then Raynor stood. Go on, he said softly. Your place is there now. Noma hugged him suddenly, surprising them both. Her voice trembled. You're part of our family now, no matter where you go. He froze for a second, then gently returned the embrace. And you're part of mine. As Noma and Lyra walked down toward the valley, Raynor watched until they were small figures among the people of Haven Ridge. Then he turned toward his truck, the morning light glinting off his badge. He climbed in, started the engine, and drove back toward the horizon. The dust rose behind him, fading into the sunlight. At the edge of the valley, Noma looked back one last time. Lyra waved, whispering, Goodbye, brother human. The wind carried the words far, beyond the ruins, beyond the war, beyond the stars themselves. And somewhere on that broken planet, humanity and compassion took root again, not in armies or machines, but in the quiet promise between a human and two alien sisters. A promise that one day, kindness would unite their worlds.